Yo, and welcome back to Semen Retention. Today, whoa, that was some loud sounds from my laptop. Don't stress, we all chill here. Doesn't matter what comes because when we are on Semen Retention, we just dipping and diving and swerving through all these spiritual attacks. We're on our toes, we're ready to go, you know? So don't stress, it's all good. Semen Retention is here. To all my new subscribers, welcome to the channel. Today what I'm going to be talking about is not specifically related to semen retention, but it is kind of like a common thing that you will encounter whilst you're on this practice, especially if you've done the self-work and all the kind of, shedding of the ego and all that kind of stuff as well. So what I want to talk about is the copycat kind of, syndrome that occurs. I don't know if it's a syndrome, but let's just go with that, copycat syndrome. So essentially what I've noticed is even before I started practicing semen retention, even when I was a kid, I noticed these kind of copycat like instances, right? So I remember when I was in primary school, I used to come up with some funny things, like some funny catchphrases and stuff. I was like the kind of that quick-witted kind of class clown like person that would absolutely destroy someone with like a couple of words and really just shut them down, because it was like I was very smart for my age, and I kind of saw through a lot of BS, but in that as well I also came up with some funny things, and then I noticed that some people started to claim them as their ideas, but that was never the case. See, when you're like anointed, or you are like what you could call a chosen one, so to speak, you just have an aura, you just have like a presence about you that is unmatched, right? Maybe unmatched in your kind of local community, right? On a global scale, of course, we've got like, we've probably got hundreds of thousands of chosen ones out there that are actually like paving the pathways and really pioneering and pushing through these barriers to create this new earth, or wherever we're going. I don't know where we're going, but it seems like it's getting better. And before you kind of think, oh, hang on, how's it even getting better? Well, the thing is that there's a bit of a split. Okay, there's a split between realities. If you are, practicing celibacy, self-preservation, semen retention, if you're a woman, you protect that energy, keep that energy to yourself. Don't go giving yourself away to some random dude. Same goes for you guys as well. So let's go back onto the topic of copycat. And so, this happened through primary school, happened in high school, especially when I started making some friends and doing stuff like music. I noticed that one of my closest friends, I'd call him my best friend throughout high school, just loved to, I don't know, he loved to bring up things that I said, and he'd always latch on to kind of things. He was one of those kind of dudes that had one of those memories that like he could literally parrot any catchphrase. He never invented any catchphrase. He never came up with any ideas. He wasn't a creative person, but he was like an NPC that could just like, parrot a catchphrase from The Simpsons. He could parrot a reference from the TV. He could bring up some advertisement that was, part of our childhoods and, reenact it. Not great, but he could do it, he had that ability. And so he was what I would call an advanced copycat. An advanced copycat is someone that, has the ability to just completely parrot and to project and to present an image that is, pretty spot on to what it is, yeah? They don't have the ability to be able to come up with their own creative things. They don't have the ability to, to push through envelopes, push the envelope, push through creative barriers and create something new. That is what the anointed, that is what like the chosen ones do. And especially guys that go on semen retention long enough, when you actually have a bit of a kundalini effect, that is when you start to really reshape yourself and continue to, I guess, expand your consciousness. So what I noticed is he was one of those copycats. And then I ended up recruiting more copycats to my community. By the time I was in university, I had probably like 20 people in my friendship group, and we used to hang out and go to gigs and do all this crazy stuff. And at the time, I wasn't practicing semen retention, but they were still in that kind of adoration, kind of copycat mode. And what I noticed is that it started to get to me a bit, because there was one point where I was at a gig, and this is the advanced copycat dude's gig, and I noticed that he completely ripped off or more than one, maybe like 2 or 3 of my songs from a band that we were in when we were in high school. He started this new band like years later, and he basically ripped off this whole riff. And I just thought it was really interesting. And I kind of like stood there watching them play the song, and I was like, wow, he's like legitimately just like taken my idea and made it kind of shit. You know, here's the thing, is that the copycats, they don't have the ability to take an idea and make it better. They can only take an idea and do like a tribute band version of it, or do like you know, a Wish version, or a Temu version of it, an eBay version, a Craigslist version of it. You know, like they're not getting the new product from, you know, from the retailer. They're not going straight to Puma and getting a fresh T-shirt. They're getting, you know, they're getting the Puma T-shirt that I wore when I donated it to the op shop, when I donated it to the thrift shop, you know, and then they're wearing it around like, yeah, yo, how fresh am I? It's just like, no, you're not fresh. You're used. So the thing is that this copycat kind of thing occurs also on semen retention. So when I started to, you know, get out of this whole kind of binging addiction kind of anhedonia phase, anhedonia is basically the addiction to hedonism. It's like, you know, you're addicted to sex, drugs, alcohol, partying, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So when I got out of that phase, I started to really see that there was NPCs and narcissists and stuff like that just around me copying me. They were copying me, and it's just because your aura and your authenticity is it's hard not to look up to, you know? Like I also have copied my idols in the past, but now I'm kind of creating my own version. And the thing is that my main idol as far as music goes, he's an Australian artist called Daniel Johns. He's the singer of a band called Silverchair that was really big in the 90s and the 2000s. And I noticed that even certain elements of my image is quite similar to him. You know, the eyes and the mustache and the goatee, and even the head kind of in its, you know, forehead or whatever. There's some similarities there, but I think the way that I look at it is that when I was a teenager, I was trying to copy him because I was inspired by him, because he looked like who I could be. And then as I grew up into a man, I respected his ability. I respected the fact that he is an anointed one, that he is a chosen one. I respected the fact that he is, you know, a very talented, respectable musician. But I got to a point where I had to start to sculpt my own identity. And the funny thing is that if you know anything about Daniel Johns, is that when he was a teenager, he was compared a lot to Kurt Cobain. And that's because when he was young, he had long blonde hair, and he sung grunge music, and his music was very similar sounding to Kurt Cobain, to the point where Courtney Love even said to him, hey, what's up with this guy from Silverchair? He looks like my dead husband. Like literally, she said that on the microphone whilst he was there watching. And, you know, that kind of hate, the copycat does get a little bit of hate, but the chosen one can outgrow the copycat archetype and become their own, you know, self-realized being. So these are really interesting things, and where stuff like self-preservation and celibacy come into effect is when you are kind of depleting yourself from, you know, your life force energy. You become a hater. You become a hater of chosen ones, because they are the people that are anointed. They have the kundalini. They have the spirit within them. and you can't help but feel envy of them because you're depleted and you don't have that, and you're thinking that they're cheating, or it's just luck, or it's just some, it's something, just, arbitrary. There's no real good reason why they're successful. They didn't even deserve it. That's your mindset when you're a Kuma. But what you do is you eventually get to a point when you're cultivating your seed, and you start to look at these people and you're like, actually, I really respect you. You did a lot of hard work. You went through a lot of trials and tribulations, and you're still standing. Like, if you guys look up the story of Daniel Johns from Silverchair, like, this guy completely defied odds. He became famous when he was like 15 years old. He went through multiple physical illnesses like arthritis and anorexia, and he copped a lot of hate and all that kind of stuff. He's not a perfect human being, none of us are, but at the end of the day, he went through that, that crucifixion, and he came out, he's still standing. So that's a good thing. And he has created his own identity, and so am I. I'm creating my own kind of unique identity. Whilst I was on my journey following his footsteps, I swayed a little bit to a different direction that was just different to his, but I still feel inspired by that action of becoming your own person, And so I kept on noticing more and more people copying me as I went on. There was this time where I got a gig, and then I was seeing someone at the time, and then she's like, "Oh, hey, this guy started following me. He reminds me of you." And he actually didn't really look like me. He was just a white boy with similar kind of features. Like, he didn't look like me at all. But he had the same kind of image. He wore the same clothes. He played the same songs, and he was putting himself out there to the same venues. What this guy actually did is that he followed every single one of my followers on Instagram except for me. So he followed everyone on my Instagram except for me. And I just thought, wow, this guy's an absolute tool. Like, they're like, if you're going to look up to someone, okay, if you're going to be inspired by someone, just be the bigger man and just say, like, mate, you're inspiring. See, there's been instances in my life where I've known someone, like, for example, this guy that was my dad's computer technician's son. He was like, hey, I want you to meet my son. He's, likes music. And so I met his son. And then we had a jam, and he was rough, he was rusty, he was raw, but he had an energy, and I liked it. And then we crossed paths like maybe like 4 years later. He'd grown up a bit, and he'd been matured, and he had a cool sound, and he still had that energy, but it was a bit more refined. And I was like, that's cool, man. And he watched me perform, and he didn't know it was me, but then he realized it was me at the end of the performance. And then he came up to me, and he's like, man, when I first saw you guys playing, I wanted to hate you. But then after you guys finished, I fucking loved your music. And like, that was like, for me, I was like, that's nobility. That's like someone that actually has the ability to, say, I do appreciate your talent. I do appreciate your dedication. I do appreciate your glow, your aura, all that kind of stuff. But the thing is that some people, usually the Kumas and the Narcissists and the Copycats, they can't do that. They hide from the fact that you are succeeding, because it's too threatening to them. When you're on semen retention, it just amplifies fully. I'll give you one more example, and then we'll wrap this video up. So I was in this band, this same band that guy saw, that guy that gave me the compliment. I was in that band, and then eventually all the members except for one kind of like stopped working with me, and I just got to a point where I was like, let's just make a duo, let's just have fun with it. This guy was by my side during the whole lockdown kind of thing, and then we were making music, but we were smoking a lot of weed and all this kind of stuff. And then I noticed one day I got some new Puma shoes, and I would wear jeans, like nice casual jeans, and like a black shirt with my Puma shoes, and it's a very simple, basic look, but it suits me, yeah. And so it basically he basically ended up buying some new Pumas, and then he bought some new jeans and started wearing a black shirt. And then I was wearing this woolly kind of like jumper in the winter, and it was very like kind of like soft boy, kind of like, oh yeah, I'm just a chill guy kind of look. And then he ended up wearing that. And it just kept on going. And then to my music, I started like showing him some songs when we were jamming, and then he started to write songs with similar chord progressions. And and then the thing is that these parasites, and I know that sounds harsh, but they are parasites. They try and take your ideas and your life energy. But again, the copycat will never outgrow the original. The copycat can always just do a second hand, a dusty, a shitty eBay, Temu, Craigslist, Gumtree, out living in Melton kind of like version of the song, okay? Or version of the fashion, or version of the dish, like, yeah, it's like I'm gonna give you one more example and then we'll wrap this up. But like, you know, what I've noticed is that on SR is that I don't need to adhere things like time and measurements. I'm not really adhering to things in a quantitative aspect. In reality, I try and make things like a qualitative, emotional kind of aspect. Like, for example, I making a dish, if it says 30 grams, I roughly get 30 grams, and then the next thing's like, okay, 300 mils, and I'm like, I only have 250, and I'm like, that will do. I don't stress. I don't be like, no, I'm gonna go buy a new thing and get that 50 mils. I'm like, no, who cares? And when you get good with cooking, you get a taste. It's like music. You can get a feel for the vibe that's going on, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna do a little fill here, or I'm gonna like hold this note, It's like you do, oh, I'm gonna add a little salt here, or I'm gonna, put a pinch of spice in there as well. I'm gonna actually cook that a little bit longer so it gets a bit smoky, And with my parents, I noticed my dad's got that ability. He's the artist. He can like, move around and manifest and create magic dishes with his cooking. And he's very talented in, just building things as well. But my mum, she's an NPC. She can't cook for shit. My dad always says, your mum would eat a shit sandwich, but she doesn't like bread. And it's true. Like she doesn't have taste. She doesn't understand the quality of cooking. And she never went out of her way when I was growing up to try and learn how to cook either. So now, post-retirement, she started cooking. And we have these family dinners and stuff like that. And she makes like a bean, dish. And I'm like eating it and I'm like, wow, this is terrible. Like, whereas if my dad made the same dish with the exact same ingredients, it would be excellent. So you got to understand this, is that the copycats, the NPCs, they just can't do it, guys. Yeah, just accept it. We don't have to hate them. In fact, just laugh to yourself. Don't bully them or anything like that, but just laugh to yourself, because it's funny. It's funny when someone tries to, tries to be like you, but they clearly ain't. So, that's what it is. But anyway, hope you're all having a great time on your semen retention journey. I know the energy of, the whole world has been pretty out there and wild, but I just want to give you some little advice before we finish up, which is, if you're like me and you're more of like a stimulated kind of person and very energetic, I would recommend cutting down on caffeine. I went through a couple of weeks of smoking cigarettes. I'm not smoking anymore. And I noticed I was overstimulating myself, and that created a lot of anxiety, especially when the energy of the world is quite intense. Just do the best you can to just take your shoes off, ground yourself, walk around, all that kind of stuff. And basically that's the whole thing that you need to do, is just really chillax, get your feet in the ocean water, get your feet on the grass at your local sports field, walk along the footpath for a bit, get those reflexology, get the little stones to hit different parts of your heel of your foot, and then that will relax and release tension in your body. Anyway, that's enough of me blubbering on today. Hope you're all having a great time. Let's go. See you next time. Cheers, guys.